Okay, a quick disclaimer. For some reason my Elgato decided to have footage of Hob corrupt at points, and this game doesn't let you simply rewind back to various points in the game, so I would have to replay the entire game again for about 2 minutes worth of footage, and someone try and work around it, but if at certain points the game looks all jumbled, then that's on my end, and I'm sorry about that. Hob. A puzzle-solving game with a top-down view and fixed camera that reminded me a lot of Super Mario 3D World with a cel-shaded art style like Breath of the Wild. In Hob, you play as a hooded creature with a giant robotic arm. How did that happen? Well... Wow. I knew that we would get to the arm eventually since it's all over the promotional material, but I didn't expect this game to get straight to the point like it did. Though this new arm didn't just come from a pile of scraps, the robot we've been following gave us his arm, making the character we play as the more capable of the two. We then have to wander around, solving puzzles and occasionally just slaughtering animals that try to attack us. You're able to sprint, jump, climb, slash, grapple, grab, and punch, either through a weak wall or to activate a button. We earn skill points by interacting with these towers, and we can use them to earn new abilities. Now, while I did buy this game back in April because I did want to try it, I've now seen both Zero Punctuation and Arlo's videos talking about this game, and honestly, there are no two reviewers I know of that are so vastly different in how they do what they do and their perspective. Ultimately, while Arlo's Impressions video was positive, though it was sponsored. Side note, the giveaway found at the top of Arlo's description, which he never mentioned in the video itself, and the site it led to seemed to lack any relevance to the giveaway beyond the first page, which just asked for your email, and when I asked about this, he was apparently just told to add the link in, and I'm guessing he didn't bother to check to see how, or even if at all, the link would work. I know he's getting paid to do as he's instructed, but that felt like such a massive oversight for someone who says he denies sponsored videos very frequently.
I get offers. Like, every single day, I get offers. I don't accept most of them because they just don't, I want my sponsorships to be something that I think my fans might enjoy.
And I hope that people getting sponsorships are making sure that they aren't lying on their own channel for the sake of sponsors. I don't hate Arlo for this, I want to make that very clear here, but I figured I'd say something. Anyways, while Arlo's Impressions video was positive, Yahtzee's review was negative, though Yahtzee was comparing Hob to A Hat in Time, a game I'll play and maybe even review when it comes to the Switch. As for where I place myself on this scale, I have very mixed feelings about this game, and so I think I'll start with what worked for me and then work my way down from there. This video will likely come across as a response to these two videos, but I'm going to try and stay away from that or elaborate more on similar points. Also, there's very little in Hob in terms of a plot, so this review is going to have gameplay and include parts of the finale, but none too crucial to the main plot or the ending. So, first things first, character design. While most enemies all have very bland and generic designs, the protagonist, which I'm going to call Hood rather than the protagonist or Hob Boy, has a very memorable and simplistic design that's very pleasing to the eye. Their eyes become angry when they run, but then quickly go back to normal once they're just standing around. The crease in their mask is also centered to look like they have a nose. As for their body, the most prominent feature is the gray, bulky robotic arm in contrast with the rest of their colorful and slim body. The arm is what allows Hood to drag things, punch things, grapple things, and so on, so it was a smart choice to have it be prominent in their design. Brooks Eggleston basically said the exact same thing in his video about indie character designs. I highly recommend watching it if you haven't seen it yet, so yeah. Go check that video out, it's really good. I also figured I'd mention that the HD Rumble is probably some of the best out of most indie Switch games I've played. Seriously, I know there's no way to show that in a video, but it is absolutely worth mentioning. One thing that people seem to compliment across the charts is Hob's art style, which, don't get me wrong, it's certainly unique compared to most games I play, 3D, indie, or otherwise, and I like the use of natural objects like stones and such being used like they're modern technology, like it's the Flintstones or something, but in terms of colors, it uses faded colors and grays so often that the entire layout just feels like a dull blur, and I happily welcomed any brighter colors when they were more prominently on the screen. As for the music, truth be told, I really don't remember any of it. I suppose you could argue that means it did its job in creating an atmosphere, but it just wasn't memorable enough to stand on its own. I even listened to the songs afterwards like I did with Wandersong to see if any of them would stick out to me, and none of them really felt like they stood on their own and had their own unique flair and style. Not saying that the soundtrack is bad, it's just not very memorable. The puzzles at times can make you feel incredibly smart, and are typically spread out enough to give each puzzle its own blend of exploration, combat, maneuvering, as well as, obviously, puzzle solving. Each of these underground areas would typically unlock a new element to get to a new area above ground, or be able to carry something across. While I felt I enjoyed most underground areas more, mostly because they felt more linear than the map after getting lost 3 times on the surface, It was unclear what each underground area was leading to every time in terms of unlocking new areas on the surface, so puzzles that I couldn't solve up top were sometimes hard to tell if I would figure out after going through a new underground area, or if I would need to keep this puzzle in the back of my head for later on, or even think of a new way of figuring out this puzzle in its current state. It also meant I would have to constantly reevaluate unsolved puzzles after finishing each new area to make sure I wasn't missing out on anything. Now, I like to give indie developers a ton of credit when it comes to layout and design, since the limitations of not having a large budget and having full creative control due to them not being bogged down by a big studio can lead to shortcuts or unconventional methods of designing gameplay or the narrative that can be pretty brilliant. In this instance, however, nothing overall really stuck out to me as unique or special compared to other games I've already played. You just solve puzzles, fight monsters, and interact with things. It's simple, and there were ways that they could have added their own creative spin to it, but it seems the only spin is that Hood has a giant arm which allows him to do most of everything. The worst part of all was when I was trying to find a battery. I found this one here, but because the game had made it clear that when there are either rocks or some sort of stuff lying on the ground that act like borders, then I can't move this battery out of the border and I need to find a different one. A half hour passes before I try to brute force my way through what I assume will be a barrier, but instead... Seriously. The game clearly telegraphs this rule several times prior with the use of the battery in similar puzzles, only to then shrug its shoulders and make this indent on the floor okay? As for the fixed camera, while they are consistently in the center of and the focus of the shot, Hood is so small that their character design is really only worth complimenting when you get rare moments of close-ups and you see the promotional material. It helps that the red cloak, or should I say hood, ensures that we know where Hood is at all times though. That was, again, a good call in character design. I'd also argue that the camera doesn't help the gameplay since it can either just be in a position that hinders my ability to see how far a jump is, or disorienting when it decides to cut to a different angle entirely. It also doesn't help that there's a lack of distinct momentum when you jump to or from moving platforms. Another issue is that jumps aren't always feasible, or rather the game suddenly decides that a jump isn't feasible, so if I were to even slightly overshoot jumping a ladder, then the game doesn't let me correct and just drops me to the bottom. I would sometimes try and jump and then not be able to jump off a ledge, leaving me to try and maneuver or force myself off. At times I would grapple up and try to jump onto a ledge at an angle to the left or right of the camera, but I can't just have Hood jump up on his own. I would need to make sure we were in the right direction of the ledge, which was a bit of a struggle when up on the joystick is no longer up. And Hood would look at the camera when at the appropriate angle, which led me to believe that he was actually too far to the opposite direction as before. Now there are checkpoints that are placed pretty generously, and you do respawn pretty closely to the platform you fell from in the definitive edition, only losing one bit of health in exchange. But that sense of openness that you see in the background environments is ruined by the fact that there's a fine line you need to walk in order to progress, along with the fixed camera only occasionally letting us look around through camera shifts and environmental views. I tried jumping to a platform with a robot on it, only to fall through the platform. The game is basically punishing you for trying to explore, even though on the exact same platform, the game expects you to jump this way to go to a monument in order to get more of these green combat points. Speaking of, I also felt the combat was simultaneously confusing and yet boring, since while there are a good handful of unique enemies and smart ways they're used with either the environment or in a combination with other enemies, the combat lacks any balance when faced on a level field with a handful of them, since sometimes you can wail on an enemy till they die, or just wham on them and spam A to roll away and then keep wailing on them again. Sure, there's a jump and a teleport, but when all I need to do is break their defense with a punch or a grapple, dodge their attacks, and then wail on them again, then I didn't feel the need to change up my tactics at all. And while fights could ultimately be boiled down to the basic procedure of slashing and rolling, then there isn't much to memorize. What was a real pain, however, was the map. As someone who doesn't have consistent free time on their hands, I like games that are easy to progress through in chunks or are very short and straightforward. Hobbling works if you play all the way through at once, because the quest marker only shows where you need to go, and so I spend an hour trying to find whatever unexplored area lies within the area of that marker, only to find out I wasn't supposed to backtrack to the area with that marker, but keep going in the area of the quest that I had just finished. Now, as I said, I won't be spoiling the ending of Hob, but I'm still able to use the majority of gameplay for this review because there are very few moments that drive the plot, and I guess that's my biggest problem. You're solving puzzles to shift platforms to help us progress, seeing these decrepit structures as you keep going. There's very little in the way of a storyline or a narrative, which is something I tend to appreciate most about games, particularly indie games. They like to bring a unique tone and style to the story they're trying to tell, but are still able to hit the right balance. Linear games like Undertale and Wondersong are sincere, but don't take themselves too seriously. Bendy and Thing Machine is sincere, but takes itself so seriously that when the end product is broken, then it's a pretentious joke. More open games like Astroneer and Minecraft have a reason for the game to exist, but then let you just go on your own from there. Hob is serious, though lighthearted in its style and theme, but is basically a blank-slated plot in a linear game that also promotes exploration and backtracking. Hear me out, a simple story is fine, but when a game is lacking in any other department to blow me away, I will happily go up to bat for it if it has a good narrative. But here, it's just not something I can do. And I felt time and time again that I would eventually encounter something in terms of lore or plot that would leave me invested in this world and this character, but beyond the start and end of the game, there really isn't much there to be invested in. You know what made me much more bitter, neither of those sound right to me, is that near the finale there was some sort of cutscene that was supposed to play from here to here that I missed because Hood got stuck here, suddenly appeared here, and I couldn't even pause the game. Now I'm willing to forgive small details in the game like this one, or even this one with the fish flying out of the water, but this is a bug that ripped out one of the very few story beats this game has, and is a bug that forced me to close the game in order to keep going. Ultimately, when you put all these elements together, the lackluster plot, frustrating controls, unengaging puzzles, and meh combat, the game is just boring. I think it's simply due to the lack of focus this game has, how it tries so many things but only ever scratches the surface of each one. Maybe if it kept a tighter focus on being linear, never needing to backtrack, or being more generous with the fast travel spots, making movements easier, with a greater focus on more difficult and complex battles and puzzles, then it wouldn't have felt as long or as drawn out as it was. Now, you've probably expected me to give the final number by now, but instead, with my own thoughts laid out, I'm gonna let something be known if you haven't known already. Runic Games, the studio behind this game, shut down, likely due to the poor sales of Hob. Good people put their heart and soul into this game, and it just didn't work out. So one question I couldn't let go in my mind, no matter how unfair it is to me or to anybody else, is this. Was this game worth shutting down a company? Well, obviously, no. I don't think the game is fun, and I wouldn't recommend it, but I feel like it isn't the kind of game that should put the final nail in the coffin like it did. But I can't change what's already been done, and so with all this information, I'd say that Hob might be worth trying when it's on sale if what I've mentioned isn't a deal breaker for you. I can see why someone would say it's a good game, but personally, I've played it once to try it, a second time for this review, and that's all I feel I really need out of this game. If you are, however, looking for a game that I had more fun with, I recommend The Sword of Ditto. It looks like a free Cartoon Network online game mixed with a Link to the Past, a game I didn't play but my friend Max claims it's similar to, as well as Blossom Tales gameplay. It's mostly combat focused, so fortunately there's a bunch of enemies, a bunch of tools and perks to mess around with, and even some simple puzzles. I'd hate to leave this review on too sour of a note, so I figured I'd leave it here on a positive thought on a game I don't think I'm going to review. But I'd figured I'd mention anyways at some point, so there you go. And that is Hob. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know, again, little all over the place in terms of review. I just needed to figure out how I was going to break the ice after doing long, drawn-out bendy videos for, half a year now at this point. So, yeah, hopefully this was something you did enjoy. I'm going to throw out maybe 2-3 more reviews before I jump back into bendy again. I'm going to be editing that in between every review, so that way it's kind of almost like I'll have a somewhat consistent upload schedule, hopefully. And, yeah. I might also be getting into live streaming again, since it's summertime and I'll have a couple of days to where I'm just kind of able to relax, not have to do voiceover for a while. And yeah, I really enjoyed live streaming last year. You all were very supportive of me. Those videos are all still on a unlisted playlist. I'll leave that in the description or somewhere if you are wanting to check that out. They're nothing too interesting, but it was a good time for me, and I'm glad whoever tuned in did seem to enjoy it. So yeah, expect that. Reviews. Let's see, have I covered everything? Live streams, reviews, bendy. I think that's everything. So yeah, you enjoyed this and want more, be sure to like and maybe subscribe if you want to see more of this from me in the future. Maybe let me know what you think of the new outro when that comes up in a second. And yeah, see ya.